Pilots of Reddit, what is the scariest moment of your career?
Oh, that was strange. I seem to have lost my voice for a second there. Anyway, pilots of Reddit, what is the scariest moment of your career that passengers may have been oblivious to? Finally, my time to shine. Airline pilot here, going on 4 years now. I was flying into a small Midwestern airport in the middle of summer. On approach to the airport, we received an alert by the onboard equipment to climb immediately to avoid hitting another plane. Fair enough, climb as instructed, see the offending aircraft below us, and decide to continue the approach. On a 3-mile straight in final to the runway, we spot a wall of torrential rain rapidly approaching the field. It looks far enough away that we think we can beat it to the airport. About 100 feet off the runway, the rain hits us and we go complete whiteout. Can't see anything out of the windshield. Immediately start a go around and we get as low as 20 feet before the airplane finally starts climbing. Upon exiting the rain and at about 500 feet, we finally are able to see again and get another alert for a helicopter right in front of us. This time we are told to descend. All in all, the most hectic and terrifying series of events in my entire time in aviation, about 10 years total now. That sounds absolutely terrifying. No passengers because I was on a solo, but definitely the scariest moment of my piloting career. I was on my first solo in a T6 and I was really nervous all morning prior to stepping. I pounded coffee, chair fluid in my head a dozen times and fake smiled my way through the entire morning. I took a quick pee because of the coffee, smiled for some pics and then headed out to the aircraft, nervous as hell. I take off and I can't believe how normal this all feels. I get up to my assigned block in the MOA and start cruising around. I'm doing circles at 14,000 feet, all trimmed up, everything is dandy. It feels so normal and easy in fact that I start to question it. I remember that they say you notice things on your solo, little lights and cockpit indications that you wouldn't normally ever notice. But I don't feel that way, which worries me into thinking that I may be lost SA. So I start the most in-depth operations check of my aircraft ever as I'm tooling around the MOA. Cockpit pressure, good. OBOGS is good. Engine gauges, check. Fuel's looking nice. I'm in the right block in my MOA, I have the auxiliary field in sight, I'm on the right radios. What am I missing here? And then I look down. Flopped between the loop of my ejection handle are my testicles. In my nervousness, I'd evidently forgotten to zip up the bottom zipper of my flight suit when I peed right before stepping. And then I cinched myself down in my ejection seat really tight, causing my testicles to mash their way out of the flight suit and between the ejection handles. Frick, the sight of your own balls between a chair with a rocket under it is something that would cause any man to nearly faint. With the precision of a surgeon, I take off one glove and try to smush my balls in enough so that I can re-zipper them. But I can't stop myself from touching the ejection handle a bit, and images of me accidentally setting it off and castrating myself are just too much to bear. To compound matters, because I was a trashy pilot at this point, I thought I was in trim, but now was oscillating wildly, losing 2,000 to 3,000 feet every time I go heads back out. I literally cannot get the damn thing re-zippered while staying within the confines / block restrictions of my MOA. I have to get 5 touch and goes to pass my solo, and I think my odds of accidentally setting off my ejection seat are higher than doing a trashy landing and being forced to eject. I head towards the auxiliary field, balls still out, determined to do the 5 best landings ever, and then piece the F back home. Turns out that I should have flown every sortie with my testicles out because they were the 5 best landings ever. With your balls quite literally on the line, you fly much better. Made it back to base, no problems, and mercifully extracted myself from the ejection seat upon taxiing back to parking. And as I climbed out, someone took the following picture. Zoomed in, it's obvious to see that my zipper is still not closed. Oh my god, he's linked a picture of the actual photo, and as you can see, oh dear, it's not good for him. I had a single engine rating and some time in piston twins. Grandfather used to be a pilot and owned a Piper Aerostar twin, but he had gotten to the age he hired pilots to fly when needed. One of his pilot buddies had told him he was good to go in an Aerostar, and Grandad asked me to meet his friend at the airport and let him take the plane around for 30 minutes or so as a refresher to the systems. Met the guy at the plane and he was about as old as Grandad. I never turned down a plane ride, so I sat co-pilot while he did his thing. I had the sudden realization about the same time the wheels left the ground that neither of us had any business flying that plane. I could tell he was just not staying ahead of the plane mentally. I ended up taking a lot of the duties. I'm gonna go ahead and raise the gear, let's go a little higher than treetop, why don't we start a slow turn back to the airport? What I remember most is just booming over treetops at wide open throttle. The ground was moving super fast. Somehow between the two of us we got back on the ground, but I think that was the moment that old pilot decided he was getting too old to fly. Commercial pilot here, not at the airlines, but I did have a passenger. Working with the newer pilot, we were flying a VOR approach into a smaller airport. We were on with center on route control and were cleared into the airport with no other traffic in the area. We're flying in the clouds, and once we get to about 10 miles out, we started announcing on the CTAF airport traffic radio. No answer. About 3 minutes later, right after a radio call, we broke out of clouds on the approach about 2 miles out, just in time to see another aircraft opposite direction entering the clouds about 100 yards off our right wing. Someone was trying the big sky theory and not talking on the radio scarred the crap out of me. I guess he means that other pilot wasn't even on the radio telling air traffic control what his plane was doing. That is dangerous. Beginning a takeoff run, flight was delayed and everyone was eager to get going. Going down the runway, looking at the gauges, not good. Engine RPM was not the level it should have reached in those conditions. Continued the takeoff run a bit longer because the RPMs were seeming to rise to the required levels. Right as we reached rotation speed, no V1 today guys, we are in a DA-40 with a 5,200 foot runway, and the aircraft began to lift off the ground, I made the decision to abort the takeoff and cancel the flight. As soon as we lifted off the runway, I cut the power and landed straight ahead. Would we have made it? Probably. Was the engine running abnormally? Yes. Rather safe than sorry. They all had no idea, but I had a little war going on in my head during the whole takeoff run. Not sure if this is the best story, but figured I could contribute some. The scary part wasn't so much aborting a takeoff with runway running out, but knowing that if I continued the takeoff, there was the possibility of an engine failure during the climb, which would have been fatal. The passengers would have had no idea. Excellent decision. A friend of my father's was flying a company float plane. Took his boss for a ride one hot summer afternoon. His boss was a low-time private pilot, but wanted to try out the float plane. My father's friend had to know they weren't going to get over the trees at the end of the lake after it was so sluggish getting off the water, but I guess he decided to act too late. They did not survive. Wow, that is sad. I guess that shows the dangers of flying when you're not completely sure you're going to be safe. Charter pilot here with two stories. 1. Flying a single engine plane in IMC, descending to destination on a GPS approach. Not real cold and no icing forecast or reported. At about 6,000 feet, I noticed ice building on the wings and windshield. It continued building up until about 3,000 feet, and by then the plane was flying heavy. This airplane had no de-ice equipment. The whole time, me and my co-pilot are saying we hope our passengers aren't seeing this. We landed without incident and the ice had turned to slush. We are thinking all is okay, passengers didn't see anything, but one of the packs climbs out of the plane and exclaims, "That was so cool, did you see all that pretty ice on the wings? I got several pictures on my phone." I don't think that passenger understands the dangers of flying heavy, wow. And secondly, me and a co-worker are returning from a meeting. He was not a pilot. We were landing at an uncontrolled airport and I overflew the field to have a look at the windstock. It was standing straight out and indicating a strong direct crosswind. I attempted landing 3 times and was blown way off course each time. The 4th attempt, I was about 20 feet above the runway and the airspeed indicator is jumping wildly due to the 25 to 30 knot crosswind from my right. In a crosswind approach, you turn your aileron into the wind and apply opposite rudder, so you are flying with your wing in the wind slightly lower than the other one. I'm tense and keeping an eye on the airspeed when all of a sudden the airspeed needle drops to nothing. I was in a microburst. It's the same as a wind shear but at ground level. I was in a downdraft of wind that was blowing my airplane to the ground. I pushed the throttle all the way forward in an attempt to gain some airspeed. I hit the runway on the main gear. Not real smooth, but I was down. I was still set up with my aileron turned into the wind when all of a sudden the wind changed direction and began blowing from the left. I was still rolling about 50 to 60 mph when the left wing raised up before I could correct the controls. My co-worker sensed no real sign of trouble until now. I corrected the controls for a left crosswind and looked out the right window and noticed the right wingtip was about 2 feet from digging into the runway and cartwheeling the plane. After what seemed like forever, the plane settled back down on both main gear. I taxied to the ramp and could not walk when I got out. I just sat on the ground for about 10 minutes. Wow, that would really shake you up. ATC, or Air Traffic Control, gave my plane clearance to take off on runway 35 north at airport GFK, while simultaneously allowing for a similar aircraft to depart from runway 26 west. These runways cross one another. We almost collided at 500 AGL above ground level. The other aircraft was so close I could literally make out the expression on the pilot's face. Pilot of an Airbus 320 here. Flying into a high elevation port in Asia, 23,000 feet on descent, I had a total loss of electrical power. All screens went dark, including standby instruments and emergency lighting. To put this into perspective, Airbus designed this aircraft with 3 electrical generators in addition to power supplied by batteries and the emergency generator. It is designed to never be without electrical power. Even if both the engines failed, you ran completely out of fuel and the auxiliary power unit would be operative. It's a scenario pilots don't even train for because it's never supposed to happen. After a partial recovery of our screens, it was followed by 12 consecutive warnings associated with different onboard systems. We landed safely. passengers didn't notice a thing apart from the lights temporarily going out in the cabin. The car analogy would be you driving at 100 kilometers an hour on a highway and suddenly all your windows are covered up, you lose your speedometer and all electrical systems, there's no response from the brake or the accelerator, but you can still feel the car going. Anyway, that is the end of my first episode from r/AskReddit. If you enjoyed something slightly new from a different subreddit, leave a like below. If we get 200 likes, I will make another video on AskReddit. Other than that, like, share and subscribe for more Reddit content from me.